Let's see.
Yep, we're being
All
recorded.
right. Okay, class, this is our last guest speakers for the semester. This very fortunate to have them not only as my guest, but in my life. This is my sister Melissa and my brother-in-law Chris. And they are here on behalf of a few topics. Chris is a retired Navy, and my sister, being his spouse, is that's a job in itself, being the spouse of somebody in the military. You talk about event planning. There's a lot of event planning conversations there as well. But before we get started in a conversation, I want to plant the seeds. Why are they here, and why do their insight have value? Well, guys, the military has not only jobs but opportunities, and taking advantage, playing the game of serving your country and having your country serve you in some spec, whether that's they'll may invest in some of your training, some of your work skills, some of your so they may invest in your skill set that you don't have to do, and then after you get out of the service, guess what? You have that you have that on your resume, right? Like so that's kind of cool. And then we'll go into some of the event planning that goes into deployments, some things that we just never think about as civilians that I think is just fascinating to talk about. And then we'll finally touch up on their nonprofit that they started for veterans and their families. So, how are you guys doing today?
Awesome. Thanks,
Good.
Brian.
Can y'all understand my accent? I don't mean to
We
yeah.
struggle. We struggling.
You talk funny.
I swear it's water. I swear it's water. Um, so Chris and Melissa, why don't you guys do just a little, just kind of introduction, a little summary of who you guys are and what you guys do, and then we'll kind of carry the conversation from there.
Sure. I'll let you start it off.
All right. My name
Ladies
is
first.
Melissa.
What a gentleman.
My name is Melissa. I was a Campbell, and now I'm Grimes. I'm a retired teacher. Most of my years, I taught fourth and fifth grade, but I've taught everything from first grade to eighth grade in Louisiana and also in Virginia. Anyway, now we live in West Virginia. Now that Chris is retired, we have two boys that are now in the Navy. Um, and there's a lot of planning that I think during Chris's 20 years, we were together 6 months out of every year. So there's a lot of stuff that still has to be planned for, accounted for in his absence, because one parent taking on the role of both, even though we are together. A lot of that was done with myself with a full-time job. And so lots and lots of planning and lots and lots of support needed.
Awesome.
But it's all good. Yep.
And I
Chris,
am
Chris,
the
Chris, who are you?
I'm the other half. That's the better half. And yes, so 22 years retired Navy. And now we run a nonprofit retreat home for combat veterans and their families in wild, wonderful West Virginia. And we are dabbling in farming and maple syrup as well. So quite an adventure from 22 years to now this. So
What is and we're going to talk about it a little later, but what is the name of your nonprofit for any of the students that kind of want to check it out?
So it's called Mountain Cajun Getaway, MCG for short.
He's the mountain.
I'm the mountain. She's the kid. And MCG is also Melissa Campbell Grimes. So it's a way never to forget the company name.
How do you what would be the equivalent of a mountain man saying "get off my lawn"? Like get off my mountain, get off,
Here's a Werther.
get off my mountain, and you're playing your banjo.
Yeah, and here's a Werther's.
I love it. I love it. So, Chris, and Melissa, this conversation is obviously, between you guys both, because it was a team unit, for the family, and not only that, for other spouses in the community. I mean, this conversation could be, hours and hours and hours, but in terms of what joining the military did for you. Let's talk about positives, like when you chose to enlist in the service after that payoff of 22 years. What kind of life experiences, what kind of skills, what kind of things could students, and I know every situation is different, every branch is different, but just knowing what you know now, what kind of opportunities did the military offer you in your career?
Well, that's an awesome question because it offered so many things, Brian. I think the biggest thing for me, and in joining the military, it taught me how to be a multitasker to the highest level, because I am not uh, I don't know what you would call. I'm not a person that sits in a classroom and learns very well like that. But once I joined the Navy, it was learn by fire hose. Everything we did was learn by fire hose. And then once you learned it by fire hose, then you actually, for me, during that 22 years, it was all combat related experiences because we were in Iraq, we were in Afghanistan. So there was nothing that I didn't learn that didn't play itself forward every day. So it, for me, it was a great way to learn things. I learned how to communicate like I've never communicated before because communication is very important. I learned how to pack my bags according to what I was on call for. I learned how to research an area before I would go into that area. And all of that stuff has carried over into my civilian life to where it's like, I don't go on a trip, just throw a bag in the car and go. There's a lot involved when I take a trip. And sometimes it's a hinder to me as well, because it's luggage that I should be able to get rid of because I'm no longer in the military, but it's something that will never leave me. It's what I have now and how I have to operate.
It seems like you learned not only what to do, but the value of purpose. There's a purpose for this, or if I take this, there must be purpose for it, or you're going to have extra weight, or it's going to take up unneeded space, and that's a skill that I'm sure a lot of my students, a lot of them have aspirations of being like athletic directors and working where there's this kind of trickle down of command, right? Like you are overseeing others on that ladder, but that ultimately means you have to be responsible for all those people under you as well. So that the purpose really just stands out in what you just explained. Is that am I on the right track?
No, you're on the right track. The purpose. Everything has a purpose, and everything has to be directed to that purpose. Like there's an end state for everything. What we would always like to say is that for every action, there's a reaction. So packing is crucial because I'm not taking 15 suitcases with me. I'm taking, a Pelican case and a backpack, and everything that you need needs to be in that. And so you have to have those things set aside in your mind, and a checklist on paper, because once your wheels up, there's not like a Walmart that I'm going to go to pick this stuff up.
Although there may be a Dollar General because those things are sprouting up, like.
So I'm going to here and remind you that because you had to blow out on such short notices, each one of you had a cage.
Mm-hmm.
They had a cage that was their own personal closet, so to speak, with all his uniforms that were ready to go. Everything was already kind of pre-packed.
Yeah, whether it was dealing with a water operation, a land operation, my little cage area was where everything had its place. And again, 22 years of that, unfortunately, now in my civilian world, I treat my life like a cage. Like everything has to be in a place, and if it's not, it throws me off balance sometimes.
Chris, and by no means is this analogy meant to be I know what you guys have been through or what it takes, but I do like to find commonalities, right? So in my years of being an athletic trainer at UL and then at Southern Mississippi and then in Alabama, not at the University of Alabama, I wouldn't have gone there. But in the little school that I was doing my internship with, we didn't have a lot of money, so you had to make do with what you had. You had to figure out how to make things and rig things. You know, my students probably don't know this reference, but MacGyver, right? You had to kind of learn how to make things work with what you had. Um, was that uh, n not knowing the military, was that encouraged, frowned upon? Did you have to stick to this is how we solve this problem, or did you have the ability to think outside the box to say, well, we need to fix this broken thing and we don't have this piece, so we need to make it happen? Like, did it allow you to grow from a because you said you learn best by doing, not by, you know, reading a book, but one of the best ways to learn is by kind of being allowed to make those mistakes. But in my mind, I'm thinking of every movie I've ever watched in the military where like people are terrified to make a mistake, right?
Well,
So
yeah,
it's like
they are.
it's kind of a duality I'd like for you to discuss.
So they are. I was fortunate enough to work in a place where they gave me the freedom of movement to a degree. So when something was needed to be or was broke or needed to be fixed, whatever it was,
Mhm.
I had that ability to reach outside of that box and fix it. Now, sometimes there might have been a consequence afterwards. I'd have gotten a good old, hey, that a boy. And then once the door shut, I'd have gotten something else. You know, what were you thinking? But then after that, it would once again, it was like, hey, but thanks, you fixed the problem. So again, that's that cause and effect thing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but being able to think outside of the box, it has increased my ability to see things differently. And not be afraid. You can never be afraid. Once you make a decision, you have to run with it. And if you run with your decision based off of all your training or your schooling, whatever it is, if you go into it with a sensible reasoning, not getting people hurt, but you figure out, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and you do it, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna you rely on that training and your skill set that you have, whatever it's in, and our all our lives run parallel. Just because I'm in the military doesn't mean that a physical trainer doesn't have that same thing. You've got to fix something right now and then, and you do it. And if you take your training and you allow yourself to go, I've been trained in this, and you just do it, it's going to work. It's going to work. It's going to work. And if it doesn't, then you come back from that and you say, what didn't work?
What part should I tweak?
What part should I tweak? Exactly. And that's just everyone's life. I mean, that's that when you're raising a family and children, it's the same thing. You know, if something happens, you go with your instinct.
So do you think there's, the cliche, don't think, but there's some people like me that overthink, where I'm overthinking so much that I end up thinking myself in circles, and then where versus your first inclination, there's it from what it may be wrong, but you can learn from it more because it was kind of it wasn't an overthought decision, and those are you can learn from, to me, easier than kind of flipping a coin.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Chris, in your experience, so again, my nephews, your boys are in the Navy. They're getting training and they're getting experience and we have a mutual friend that I'm not going to say his name, but when he got out of the Navy, his special skills allowed him to like do contract work and specialized like work. Is that here? So here's my question. Do people go into the Navy with the set plan of, I'm going to learn these particular skills and then I'm going to parlay that after to do a certain job, or you just kind of have to play the hand the Navy gives you and then try to find a means to possibly make work out of it after? How does that kind of do it? Or maybe it's a little bit of both.
It is, and that's another good question. It is a little bit of both. And like I tell my boys now, only you are concerned about you. So you have to take care of yourself. You have to have purpose. Now you can go into the military and go, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going in. And that might work out for you. But if you go in with some expectations and have an idea of what you want to do and make sure that because the military is using you no matter what, that you're a number. So use the military back. In other words, if I want to get out of the military after 6 years or 26 years, this is where I want to be. You make sure those T's are crossed, those I's are dotted, and whatever wickets are needed, you start lining those up so that you're setting yourself up for success. Otherwise, it's a waste of your time, because you want to utilize everything that's there, and there's so much in the military that you can utilize in terms of training, and it's a skill set that, just the skill set itself, people will always say, oh, you're going to shine. Well, I didn't understand that at first, but I did once I started to transition out of the military life into the civilian, because there's so much regimented ways of thinking and doing things that most civilians never think about. And I can come into a job and do 15 things in one day where it might have taken someone else 2. And it's not because they're lazy. It's just like, here's the job. It's got to get done, and you just do it. So,
can I point out something too?
Yeah.
What I'm talking about with the training and setting yourself up for life after the military. So many of his brothers, whenever they were flying UAVs, which is the unmanned aerial vehicles,
gotcha.
They actually went to trainings at Boeing. So they went to Washington State for 3 months at a time, trained with the Boeing people, made Boeing connections. And when they got out of the Navy, they were already trained, and Boeing just scooped them up.
It's a side question, but do you have to get any of those experiences cleared by the military before you put them on your resume, or can you, put I have experience with Boeing? Awesome. Because I mean, that's an amazing experience.
But not only that, but Chris would say, well, I want to learn more about this. So he would search for trainings, certain areas
that met the mission statement.
That met their mission statement, but also gave him that training in that area. And as long as his command signed off for them to get the training,
and
nobody take that away from you.
And again, I love the fact that you brought up the reciprocity, that the military is using you, so why not use them? And they're paying for all this training. So why not utilize, if you're going to be in it anyway, why not?
And it's a saying you love to say too. It's a win-win for everyone, right? It's a win-win for the military because they're using me, but I'm a smart individual. I'm trying to help myself, better myself, which is in the long run is going to benefit the military as well, because I'm going to be all I can be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But, right. So I mean, it's a win-win, and that's what made me successful, I think, in everything.
Do y'all mind sharing? So I know my nephews are just like most of us. They're different, they're unique, but so they share the commonality of being in the Navy. But can you talk about their like maybe Joe has a specific goal post-military. Maybe Josh does. Just kind of general, and I just made up those names, but just can you kind of talk about, like, just as an example, like, just here was a plan for one of our kids that he got in knowing this, or he just got in to say, hey, let me explore some different things. It's kind of like students, sometimes they go to college, some of them have a plan. I'm going to college because I want to do this. Others are like, I don't know what I want to do, so let me explore. Do you mind kind of using them as an example of these possible different enlisting?
No, I'll hand it over to you.
I'm going to talk about Josh. I'll let him talk about Joe.
Okay.
So Josh ended up going into the Navy as a sonar tech. He fixes the sonars on he's actually on a destroyer right now, and so he had to learn electricity. He'll be able to carry that information.
Wow, brilliant.
He had to learn basic electricity, and then he learned how to work on sonars. Now the cool thing about that is, if he decides to get out, the MRI machines and CAT scan machines are all set up the same way.
Wow.
So we'll know how.
Wow.
and be able to work in a hospital setting.
Wow.
Charge.
It's
because-
like free. It's like free trade school. But well, free. Like there's that reciprocity there. But wow.
I'll add to that. His responsibility, though, is to, if this is something that he wants to pursue, he needs to contact the hospital and talk to those technicians and say, hey, what else do I need? What would I,
While I'm still active.
what would you be looking for me to have? And if he can get those qualifications, do it while you're already in the
Ready to
military.
go.
You know, do it. And you have to ask, you have to say, well, can I do this training for what? Well, I want to benefit myself too, because this is going to further my education, which, hey, I've always been a believer that if some junior sailor below me is not going to stay in, I don't care. If this is a stepping stone to get you to a higher elevation or a better goal, then let's, I'm here for you too. So what do you need to put yourself in that position? And if I can get you it, let's get it. Let's do it.
And I don't mean to assume, but I bet a very small percentage of military personnel think to do that. And I could be wrong, but just
you're
like
right.
I would think a majority of them are like, not to stereotype, but like the Forrest Gump, where I'm here, I'm going to follow my orders, I'm going to do what I'm told, and not kind of think of it as well, man, I can use this opportunity to benefit myself in a lot of, that's really cool.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then Joe.
So Joe, same thing. He followed my footsteps and went into the intelligence field. And in the intelligence realms, there's so many breakouts, and his breakout is he does HUMINT work. So he does HUMINT, which means, in a nutshell, he deals with people. So he uses people as sources of intel, picture given to him and stuff. So he has to interact with people,
asking questions
and just getting information through different sources. And that can lead in many different ways. But for Joe, what he's looking at is, as an independent contractor, once he gets out, he's thinking he's going to get out after his 6-year term, to do some contracting work.
as of right now.
Yeah.
And it does not have to be military based, but it could be in the field of, so let's say, security with a cruise ship. Because when you talk security with cruise ships, a lot of those security companies are run by ex-military members that have that experience. So where's the cruise ships go? Well, now he's going to have to start looking into sources in those communities that where the cruise ships go, to start asking questions on what's happening in those areas. Is it going to be safe for the cruise ship to go there in the future? So there's all kinds of possibilities.
It's so brilliant, man. The practical education that you just can't get outside of the U.S. military.
And a lot of companies, if you are prior military, that is a bonus because of the structure, because of the fact that you are expected to have some sort of structure to your life.
Well, and you've done it. You've learned it. You've learned it. But not only did you sit in a classroom and learn, but by golly, you were hands-on for whatever doing this. Like someone who comes out of college looking for a job as an athletic trainer versus myself, who did not go to college, but I've been doing the exact same job for 15 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to crush that college student.
Yeah.
You come
well,
to
maybe not college, maybe not athletic trainers, because they are constantly on the job too. But like a teacher, you don't get classroom experience when you're in classes. Until you're student teaching.
So there's drawbacks. The drawback is that you got to remember that when you join the military, if you join the military for the schooling purposes and that classroom training and hands-on training, it's great, but you can never forget that you signed a piece of paper saying you will defend the Constitution, which means that there's the very strong possibility that you will be in a war zone. And I have heard people say before, when that crap hits the fan, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up for a college degree. Well, but
this is PE. I want to point out another positive for my students, because if you have a degree and then you go into the military, does that offer you, is that dealing with potential officer stuff? What is the benefit, or is there a benefit of having an undergraduate degree before you enlist?
It can be, and that's another benefit. So you can join, you can go to one of the academies and go that route, or you can already have your degree and come in and say you want it to be a dentist, or you want it to be a doctor, or you want it to be a logistics specialist.
Yeah.
Supplies. You know, if you already have that degree, the military will help you.
And that's
in some cases
through your recruiter.
Through your recruiter,
Right.
Yeah.
pay that student loan off, but you're now an
Absolutely.
officer, and you're getting some experience that you would have maybe never gotten in the civilian world. And it could boost your career if you decide you want to do it for a 6-year period.
I want to point out that, man, there's so many things to talk about, guys. This is, I'm really enjoying myself. Travel. A lot of students that are from here tend to want to stay here, which is totally understandable. I don't mean to be a hypocrite. I'm from here and I work here, but I went to Mississippi. I went to North Carolina. I went to Auburn, Alabama. And that's how you learn how to cook in different kitchens. And
Right.
not only that, when you apply, because a lot of my students will say in this class, I want to work as an athletic director in a college or in a university. Well, how many of those do they have in Louisiana, right? There's more all over the country than there is in Louisiana. And traveling and living in different places and experiencing different things, if somebody applies for a university job in California, and they see that you've never been out of the state, or I'm just saying, like, that's another, I know it may be far on the list, but having lived and traveled and moved, to some employers, that's like a check mark. Like, oh, they're not going to come here and get homesick. They're not going to come here and like that's positive. Like being able to show that you can move and travel, and because that happens in the area that I teach. A lot of my kids go into physical therapy, occupational therapy, and talking to some of those programs, they say that's the biggest reason for dropout, when a student has only kind of lived in one area and then they come to this school and they get homesick and they just can't adapt to a new city, or they were from a small town and now the school's in the big city. So I just think that kind of sounds appealing as well, just knowing that an applicant isn't gonna come here for a new job and then all of a sudden bail after a year because they miss home.
Did you want to say something?
I mean, I think we see so many people that, like, living in Virginia Beach, we had people, that came through, the command, and we got to know, and that's basically our family, because my whole family is still in Louisiana. So our family over the last several years was our military family. And so many of them will, I like to use the term bloom where you're planted.
Oh, nice.
Here, so make the best of it. Make the best out of what's around you. Make the best out. Do your best at your job, so that people notice you and they will help you climb and go to the next step or whatever. But every now and then you get people that are just miserable wherever they are, and you can't. So don't have that attitude.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm here right now. Let me make the best. Let me see, check out what's around. Let me find what's interesting to me. And until the next opportunity opens up, and then you'll have those contacts there that will never leave your life. Hopefully, so.
Yeah.
But to bloom where you're planted is very important.
Melissa, that made me think of Cadillac, and I know my students don't know what I'm talking about, but where you get dealt a hand and you get a new card to either say, hey, this is going to improve my hand, or it won't, and you just kind of keep playing that gradual progression game of every opportunity. You could either choose to not improve your hand, or you can choose to improve your hand. And, over the course of time, you have a much better hand than when you started.
No, totally agree. And what I tell the boys all the time too is like, hey, listen, you're young in your career. It's very important that you don't get in your mindset that you need to settle down in one spot and stay there right now. Because if you want to grow in your job, you have to move. you have to move around because you're going to learn so much from so many different people. Don't worry about being in one particular spot right now. You're not there yet. You're not ready to be there yet. You shouldn't be there yet. You need to be moving to different places and experiencing life.
And tell me, and then we're going to transition to the nonprofit stuff, but tell me if this is true or not, Chris. In a lot of military movies that I've seen and listening to podcasts of real, military heroes talk, movement is life. You don't want to stay still if you're in the crap, and because eventually you're going to die. And I know that that's an extreme, but it can be a metaphor for what your point was, is that movement is life and movement is survival, and movement will eventually lead you to potentially a better place.
Absolutely. It's shoot and move. You never sit still, right? You just
never want to stay still.
Never want to stay still. In fact, everyone tells me now, why don't you sit still? Because I can't sit still. That's not healthy. It's not healthy.
How about this analogy? Sitting still means moving back.
I like that.
I just invented that. What you think?
I like that a lot. I got to plug my phone in here.
That's okay. So when you transition, when you got out of the military, is it called a retirement? Is it called and talk about that, and then I want to transition to civilian life and the nonprofit and kind of how that started. So let's transition out of the military into civilian life. What is that officially called?
That's exactly a transition period. Transition from military into civilian life.
So did you retire? Is retired even used in the military, or that official?
No,
okay.
Nope, it's used. Retirement is the terminology. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not. Even if you don't retire and you just do your 6 years or 8 years, whatever your term limits that you do when you transition, sometimes it's a difficult period because it is two different worlds. The military operates different than the civilian world. And for me, and not everyone, but for me, the most difficult thing was the loss of my family. So because the people that I worked with for so long are no longer
the military family. I just want to be clear for the students that are listening.
The military family, the loss of my brothers, access to them 24/7 is gone. And that's the hardest part because those were the people that I leaned on for everything, whether it was good, bad, ugly, whatever it was. We helped one another. So it's difficult. It is very difficult, but it is a transition, and it's an awesome transition because I'm goal focused. We're goal focused. So we have a mission. We have reason, and we're not sitting still. We're shooting and scooting.
Purpose.
And still moving forward.
Purpose.
Man. Purpose.
Did you? Gosh, so many questions.
Just to make sure, I don't know if this is working. If something happens that we do get cut off, we can reconnect on my phone.
No problem. There's several transitions that I'm interpreting here, and again, it's you guys to tell me if I'm on the right track or not for the application of my students. But you transitioned out of the military, but it seems like every deployment was a transition, and the transition from being with your brothers 24/7. Out of the area and then transitioning back to home is a transition within. And that actually kind of, I brought that up not only because I was curious about that type of transition, but to also segue into your nonprofit, which it seems like is kind of set up to assist in some of those transitions. If you don't mind, start to about the transitioning from being deployed to coming back home, if you don't mind, for the students that aren't familiar with what that entails.
So the transition from deployment to home, I've got some awesome stories, and again, we can talk forever. But for the most part, I'm out forward, and let's say it's myself and 15 other guys, maybe 20. We have a routine, and it's your job. You eat, you sleep, and you work out. And generally,
you can hang up.
I'm gonna hang up and transfer.
Okay, we'll transition. Let's see. We gotta unmute. Hello.
Yeah, I unmuted, but it's telling me that
I can hear you though.
okay, I'm still gonna work on the camera.
Okay, no problem.
Go ahead, Chris. Just talk, baby. I'm
Transition,
still working
so-
on this.
Oh, we're good.
I'm trying to pick up where I was at. That's all.
That's okay. We were transitioning from deployment, and you were saying how being with your brothers in
It
that
is.
setting, and then kind of coming back, and we're kind of educating my students on what that actually means
Yes.
when being deployed.
Yes. So that transition period, you get in a routine, and then when you get home, it's no longer there. I've got to do more than do my job, eat, sleep, and work out. Like, I have family responsibilities now. I've got young kids that are calling my name, my wife calling my name. People are asking me other things. Like, there's so much I call it ad hoc. There's so much ad hoc coming into my ears and my sensories. It's an overload sometimes. And it's like, I just want to go back to that crap place that I was at for the last 4 months, because I know what I'm doing.
Because all we had to do there was eat, sleep, work out, and his job.
Is distraction a fair term for when you come back, that you just have all these things competing for what you were trained to function as?
Yes, distraction is a fair term.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
And did the transition get harder, easier, or stayed the same as your service window progressed?
For me, it got harder. It's almost where you see, it's like would get home. I want to get home, but then as soon as I got home, it was like, if I can go out the door, I'm on it. I'll take that, because I'm in my comfort zone again. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so it got harder for me. In so many aspects, because I wanted to be home, but then as soon as I got home, I didn't know how to handle situations properly. So it was just easier.
We missed him so much. We just wanted to be around him all the time.
So you really had to have a partner who had a huge heart and who loved you very much, and who was in it to win it, right? But
no, you know what? And yeah, and again, we could talk so much about this, because there's so many studies that show why the divorce rate is proportional to the deployments, because if you don't have that support network and the understanding of what we're doing, and it requires both parties to talk and communicate, it's not a pretty picture.
Understanding, man, that can apply to any career, any job, any relationship.
Absolutely.
So you transition out of the military, but your experience seeing some of the struggles, difficulties with reconnecting with families, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth. I'm segueing into the next part of our conversation. That gave you a very unique perspective to know that there was a hole to fill, metaphorically speaking, or there was a need that needed to be served. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, absolutely a fair statement.
So if you could talk about that kind of transition to what you're doing now.
Yeah. So, are you there?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay. I wanted to give back to my brothers and sisters, recognizing the struggles that I had, and talking to other people, the struggles that we all have, no matter what branch of service, how long you serve, those struggles are real. And so that's where we decided to focus our attention, was turning our home into a retreat home, so that the combat veteran and their family could be reconnected in so many ways. Because for me, being home 6 months out of the year, I missed a lot, and I don't understand how they communicated or how they did things. So it's a way of having like-minded people sit together and just kind of do simple things in life, unplug from the real world, and sit down and have dinner with your family at a table and discuss real life situation, things that are happening in their lives, and not how do you say, if you've got kids and, there are different events, and man, you've got one person going one place and the other going the other, and hey, we'll high five at the Dairy Queen, and we'll grab a Blizzard, and we'll tag team each other, switch partners, and then move on to the next one.
It's man, so many different analogies are coming to my mind. Like imagine being used to going 80 miles an hour on the interstate for your job, like say a trucker, and then all of a sudden, after 6 months of getting used to that speed, you're in a small town where the speed limit's 15 miles an hour. And it's just like, and not to say one's better than the other, but it's just so different, right? Like it's just, you just kind of like, man, I just want to press the gas and get to where I'm comfortable, driving speed wise, in this silly analogy. But for, again, man, for my students, you get used to, I guess it would be kind of like an analogy that they may be comfortable with. Imagine an athlete, like say baseball player, basketball player, football player, in season is probably a different home life than off season, right? Like in season is just just the chaos and the rehab and the prepping and the this and the that. And then you try to make up for maybe lost time. I guess maybe some people feel. Did you ever feel guilty? Or was the communication with Melissa so good that she put you in a position where you didn't have to?
Yeah, she put me in that position. I never felt guilty. In fact, she would constantly remind me of the support network back home, and how proud she was. So that was great on her part. She made that easy for me. It wasn't until when I was about finished with my career that I realized that how much I'd missed, and how much they sacrificed. That they deployed just as much as I did. So,
True.
And again, we're talking military, but this kind of goes in hand with anything. I mean, if you're going to be a successful business owner, you cannot sit at your house and do nothing. You have to be on the move, right? To be successful, you've got a network. You've got to get out there and be a part of your business. If you let someone else run it, it's going to fall to pieces.
16-hour days.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Even to be a good professor like yourself, you can't just wake up and say, yeah, I'm going to teach a class today, and without preparing, you can't do that.
I appreciate that, but lucky for me, UL was hiring alphabetically, and and I was in the top 3 letters. Chris, families that man, so unique perspective of you and Melissa, seeing what it takes to make it work, the communication to make it work. But unfortunately, not every family has been dealt, I don't want to say dealt that hand, but has what you and my sister have. So to try to help those families, what are you guys doing up there in West Virginia for Mountain Cajun Getaway to kind of be an added service for those kind of families that just didn't quite have what y'all had in that area?
It's really a simple concept, actually, Brian. We're family centered. So we're in a very, very rural area. Cell service is inadequate, at best. So you're unplugging from that cell phone, which is a big, huge distraction. And then it's just the simple way of life. What we found is that a trip for a family vacation for me to Disney World is not very good for me and the family, because I can't handle that very well. So what we found was people would come out to our place to take hikes, to be back in nature. But what we found is that it was like, what are you all doing? Well, we're tending to our garden. What? We've never gardened. Can we help you? Absolutely. And next thing you know, the whole family's in the garden and they're laughing and talking. And then it's like, well, what do we do with all this? Well, we have to can it. Well, we've never done that. So what we started recognizing was that these simple things in life, even cooking a meal together and then sitting down at the dining room table and eating that meal and having conversation and then cleaning up and then playing board games. was so positive that everyone was like, man, Guy, I want to come back because I did things with my family that I've never do at home. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we're on to something. So that's where that research and development came in for us. And we started looking at how can we center this around the family and become a family reunification program. And do it in the simplest way possible. There's no therapist, there's no group sessions. You know what I mean? There's no,
It's
I don't
natural
tell you
and
what you have to
organic.
do.
It's
Yeah,
natural
it's-
and organic.
That's right. And it, you have to want to fix yourself. We all have issues. We all have skeletons in our closet. And if you don't want to fix yourself, there's nothing I can do, or Mel, or Mountain Cajun Getaway. But if you recognize that you have some deficiencies and you're weak in certain areas, then hey, I'm the place for you, because we can do that without even you knowing you're doing it. A
It's
simple concept.
family movement. Remember, I love things going back full circle. Movement is life, and it just seems like there's family movement. They're doing things as a collective unit, and that family movement is good for the family.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Family movement.
I like that. And to your point about, no doctors, no therapists, guys, our ancestors didn't have that. Like, there was a point in time where, like hundreds or thousands of years ago, like you had to naturally go around a fire and do things as a collective family unit, whether that was part of a local tribe or a bigger tribe, but you had to function as a
Right.
symbiotic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in other words,
everyone had
it's our
purpose,
natural
right?
instinct. I think it's our natural instinct to kind of long for those kind of experiences and make us feel better about our productivity, or about our accomplishments, and about, wow, we made this jam.
Exactly.
We made this syrup. Like that taps into our kind of natural instinct for that collective unit. So
Yeah.
how can kids learn more about it? How can they get involved? If they, maybe I have some of my students that have a family, or in the military. What's a way people can find more information about what you guys are doing up there?
I'm sorry. So can you ask that question again for me, Brian?
100%. So if some of my students are interested in getting more involved, so where one thing that's really cool is you guys are not far away from UL conference, Madison, James
Madison.
James
Yep.
Madison and Marshall. And so, I may have students that may be interested in getting involved. Some students may have I'm sure we have some students with family in the military. So if they're interested in getting involved or learning more about what you guys are doing up there for your nonprofit, for military of families, how can they find more information?
They can go to, so they can see us on social media, Facebook, Mountain Cajun Getaway. We also have a website, mountaincajungetaway.org. And that's all one word, mountaincajungetaway.org. And they can always give us a shout. They can give us a call, and talk to us about, what, if they were interested in getting involved, or if they had a family member that they thought might be interested. They can apply from on the website to come out. There's just a couple questions. And then we contact them and then go from there. But we also are always, volunteer work. I can tell you that we had our boys out when we put in the maple lines. We invited one of Mel's cousins that's living up, and your cousin too, that lives in Katie, that lives in Pittsburgh.
Uh-huh.
We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 people out at the house to help put in these maple lines back in December, and man, they had a blast. And what's funny is I laugh because I worked them like rented mules, but they had such a great time as a family in the woods together. And then we came back and we ate dinner. It was just, man, it's a memory I'll never forget. So, when you do volunteer work, because I'm a big component of volunteer work, military, big component of volunteer. You've got to be a part of your community. You have to know who's in your community, and they have to know who you are and what you're doing. And the only way to do that is volunteer work, because it's not about what can I get out of it, but what can I give back to my community. And that's when it becomes very addictive. Like you start to get involved in stuff like that and you just keep doing it. It's hard not to.
And a better community is better for everybody living in it,
Everybody.
including yourself. You know, it's
Absolutely.
it again goes back full circle to the military is going to use you, you use the military. You do
Yeah.
better for your community is going to do better back for you.
Mhm.
I love the symbolism there. The last thing I want to point out, guys, before we cut it, I try to keep these to an hour for our attention spans, you know, in life. But I want to point out to my students that the military has service academies that have full D1 athletics. Army, Navy, Air Force, and they have athletic directors and they have coaches and they have administrative ticket office people. So and you don't have to be in the service to be the coach or the athletic director. You could be a civilian and work on that campus, but I think just sometimes students don't think of the service academies.
No, and that's and you're absolutely right. They all, of course, I mean, go Navy, beat Army, but they
Yeah, that was a plug.
they do. Yeah, that was a big plug, but they do have them. It's charging. They do have them, and it's a listen again. What goes back to what we were talking about, right? You can't be closed minded. You have to shoot and scoot. You got to move. You got to network. No matter what you do in life, if you don't network and get out and start asking questions and talking to other people and seeing what they're doing in that career field, you're lost in the sauce.
Yeah.
You're lost in that sauce because things change. It's such a fast-paced world. Things change. Technology changes.
Yeah.
And so the way you treat, and since we're talking about kinesiology, since as we're talking right now, something has changed.
Correct.
They're no longer doing that way. They're doing it this way now.
Correct.
And when you start networking and talking to people, that's when you start finding out how everything is evolving and what you need to do to keep up with that. And you can bring ideas to the table, and it's an incredible experience no matter what you do in life.
And I ask my students to tell me what their dream job is, and I hope they realize that it's still possible. But guess what? Other people have your dream job in their mind as well.
Always.
And so it's really a necessity to think outside the box and find unique ways to grow, your brand or your skill set, because other people are gunning for your job. Whether
exactly.
That could be 10 years from now. Like whatever job you're going for 10 years from now, other people are also prepping for it as well.
Yeah. And I'll add to that I'll caveat that. You want to teach people your skill set too, because guess what? You can't stop time, and you're going to get older, and you're going to want to move on to something else. And you always want someone to take over where you left off at and do a better job than what you did.
Leave a legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So.
Awesome. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys' time. I love you guys very much. And with permission, I can share this video, not just to my class, but I think there's a lot of valuable info here for other students, high school students, college students. So if y'all give me permission, I'd love to share it for others to learn from.
Oh, you got our permission. I don't know. You might want to, block me out or something because the picture might not be good. But this last part with just the audio is probably the best.
It's all good, Grizzly Adams. You look fabulous. All right, guys. Y'all have a blessed day, and I appreciate y'all so much. And we'll talk soon.
Sir, love you, bro.
Love you too.